The West is absolutely collapsing, and you need to get out and leave before they stop you leaving. Western countries are beginning to realize that more and more people are leaving the country, and they're looking at new ways that they can tax you or stop you from leaving altogether, and this is going to come in the form of capital controls. In fact, capital controls have already been floated in the United States as part of the big beautiful bill, and capital controls are already in place in places like Canada, where essentially you have an exit tax procedure, and in places like the UK they are thinking about doing the same. Australia already has that method as well, and with that method it makes it very easy for governments to change things slightly so they can financially handcuff people to that country. For example, if you look in a place like Canada that has had a massive housing bubble, you can immediately see that people have built up a ton of home equity, especially people who bought 30, 40 years ago. And many of those people who leave the country are people with a lot of home equity who are looking to cash out, because to actually cash out and realize that gain, you're going to need to leave the country, because guess what? If you sell the house now, you're renting for an expensive amount, or if you sell the house and move somewhere else in Canada, it's just going to be as expensive. You're not going to save that much money. So it could easily be changed in such a way, for example, that the primary residence exemption for exit taxes is abolished. And you have to remember that you're seeing things that are changing right now in Western countries. You're seeing rising nationalism that is happening. So you are seeing more and more people who are becoming more patriotic. And whilst that may be a good thing, that also negatively impacts people if they want to get away from the country altogether. The fact is, just rising nationalism and being patriotic about your country is not going to solve the issues, although it is good long term. But coupled with the cultural dilution that has been happening in Western countries and the social engineering projects that have been happening, it means that basically you're going to see rising segregation. I mean, the fact is that there is no real community anymore in these Western countries. And if you think about it, maybe 10, 20, even 30 years ago, people had neighborhood watches, and they were incredibly important for stopping crime. Now, none of that exists, and crime is running rampant because the government has took in many, many criminals and is also letting crime flourish with stupid rules and stupid laws that allow these people to be back on the streets within 24 to 48 hours. So it's no wonder that people are looking to get out from these countries. And another reason why people are looking to flee is the fact that they want to have decent healthcare, and they're just not getting the healthcare anymore in the country that they're in. You've seen the National Health Service in the UK that is essentially under massive pressure. You've seen health services in Canada that are outright collapsing, and it takes months to get an appointment with a doctor, and that's even if you can find a doctor, because they are in short supply as well. And if you're in the United States, well, you're just going to be bankrupted by the healthcare system eventually, because it might be good whilst you have a job and whilst you are employed, but once you lose that job, the healthcare system becomes pretty nasty very quickly, as I know from family who I have in the United States. So in many of these Western countries, the healthcare system is a mess, and the public healthcare systems don't work, and neither do the private healthcare systems. And there's been so much corruption that has gone on in both government and in private companies, because corruption is running rife now across the West, and it's pretty much just the normal thing to do. And in fact, these days they're not even hiding the corruption. I mean, just take a look at this video.
This bond was made in the U.S., California. And this glass comes off the Corning line. It's engraved for President Trump. It's a unique unit of one. And the base comes from Utah and is 24 karat gold. And it sits, I'll take the liberty of setting it up.
Wow.
Congratulations,
Thank you
Mr.
very much.
President.
It's
Thank you so
fantastic.
much.
I mean, you have literal gold gifts being given, and then somehow some deal miraculously appears for that company to do with the tariffs. I mean, it just goes to show what's really going on there. And another reason why people are looking to get out is because the cost of living, and the cost of living is directly connected to the rise in crime. Because obviously, if more people can't make ends meet, then what do? A lot of them, unfortunately, will be resorting to crime. And that has become more and more the case, and that's why you've seen rising crime in cities. I mean, Canada used to be a safe country, but it's definitely not anymore, at least in the big cities. And even recently, Mexico put the UK on a caution to travel list because of the rising crime and civil unrest in the UK. And in Canada, there's even been an RCMP report that has been put out about just how much the standard of living is collapsing for the average person, and how this could lead to essentially massive civil unrest and even possibly a civil war in places like Canada. Because that's what happens. People get pushed and pushed and pushed to the point where they begin to fight back and push back. And you are starting to see that. You're starting to see more of a unification in order to push back, although it is very, very early in the stages. And a lot of people, they don't want to sit around and put their potential safety and livelihood at stake in order just to satisfy a nostalgia of a country that once was and never will be in the future. I mean, when you look at these long-term cycles of falling and rising countries, you can see that they play out over a long period of time, and they don't generally just suddenly reverse. And that's why I always caution people who pin a lot of hope on certain politicians doing things, especially when it comes to politicians that have maybe been in previous governments before, or just the other party of the same two parties that are constantly jostling for power in most Western countries. Because in most Western countries, it's really a uni party, but what they try and do is make themselves look extremely different when in fact under the hood they are very much the same way. And it's really, really sad that these countries are collapsing and failing, but it's easy to see why. Because when you've got nothing to work for anymore, and you just are working to make ends meet, and you are essentially in this state of suffering, in this hamster wheel all the time, there's no social connection, there's no community anymore, it eventually pushes people to a form of mental decline. And you are seeing that. The UK recently was bottom of the list on a mental health report, and Canada wasn't rated very well on there either. And you could see many of the Western countries were actually near the bottom in that mental health report, which really shouldn't shock people, because the reason why mental health is such a problem in these countries is because people are overworked and they have no goals, they have no aspirations, they have nothing, and just working two jobs in order to pay the rent is just not working for a lot of people anymore. So people are being pushed and pushed and pushed, and you can see how society is collapsing. And that's why it's important, in my opinion, if you can, which anybody can, they just have to have the vision and spend the time, it's important to get out of these countries and try and make a better life for yourself somewhere else. At the end of the day, the Hollywood image of the West is crumbling. The reality of the West, people just working two jobs to make ends meet, people sending their kids to daycare and never seeing them because they're so overworked, that is the reality. And the new picture is forming to those who see it. And many people are waking up to this, and many people are leaving. And I see and speak to many people in the expat community, and the theme of why they left is exactly the same. Thank you for watching.